You know, one of my favorite hobbies, one of my favorite pastimes is to get out of the house, walk around, and listen to a podcast, listen to a show as I walk. A walk and listen, right? Well, today, in this video, that's what we will be doing. We will be walking here in my city, Shanghai, China. We will be walking around and we will be listening to a TED Talk. You guys are familiar with TED, right? This TED Talk is called What Makes a Good Life? Lessons from the Longest Study on Happiness. I thought this looked like a really interesting topic. So what we're going to do is we're going to walk, we're going to listen to practice our English listening skills, and we're going to be stopping here and there to talk about what we're listening to, what we're hearing. This should be a great way to improve our listening skills, learn some new words, and get some interesting insights as well. So I'm going to go ahead and play the video. Let's take a listen. Once again, the title is What Makes a Good Life? Let's listen together.
What keeps us healthy and happy as we go through life? If you were going to invest now in your future best self, where would you put your time and your energy?
All right off the bat, a really big question. What makes us happy? Basically, is the big question here, right? What makes us happy? And he also said, if you were going to invest in your future self, where would you put your time and your energy? In other words, how would you best create your future self? What would a happy future self look like, right? Okay.
There was a recent survey of millennials asking them what their most important life goals were. And over 80% said that a major life goal for them was to get rich. And another 50% of those same young adults said that another major life goal was to become famous.
Okay, so that's my generation. I'm a millennial. Are you a millennial? I was born in the year 1994. And he's talking about this survey, right? People gave millennials this survey. They asked millennials, what do you want? And millennials said, I want to be rich. I want to be famous. That sounds about right. Yeah, that sounds about right. And I don't know. If I'm being completely honest, I don't know if I'm any different. I might be one of those millennials in that survey who said, I want to be rich, I want to be famous. But don't we all? I feel like if you asked Gen Z, right? If you asked young people now, really young people, what do you want? They would say the same thing. And if you asked my parents' generation, the baby boomers, right? That's what we call them in English, the baby boomers. You know, my parents are almost 70 now. But if you were to ask them, what do you think matters in life? I think they would say family. I think they would say love. I think they would have some good, wholesome answers. Wholesome answers. But I think they would also say money. I think they would also say getting famous. I mean, that's just part of being a human, right? You want success. Money is a really easy way, a really tangible way, to measure success. What does that mean, a tangible way to measure success? You can see it, you can touch it, you can feel it. It's not imaginary, right? You can hold $1,000 in your hand and you can think, I did this. I made this happen. I'm responsible for achieving this thing, this tangible thing that I'm holding in my hands right now. So, I don't know, what about you guys? Do you want to be rich? Do you want to be famous? Let's keep listening.
And we're constantly told to lean into work, to push harder and achieve more. We're given the impression that these are the things that we need to go after in order to have a good life. Pictures of entire lives, of the choices that people make and how those choices work out for them, those pictures are almost impossible to get. Most of what we know about human life, we know from asking people to remember the past. And as we know, hindsight is anything but 2020.
Ooh, that's a really interesting point there. You said most of what we know about life comes from asking people to remember the past. Maybe you talk to an elderly person, an older person who has lived a full life already, right? Maybe they are 80, 90, 100 years old, and you ask them, what matters most in life? What mattered most to you in your life? What would they say? They would look back, they would reflect on their life. And like he said, hindsight is anything but 2020. What does that mean? In English, we have this expression, we have this saying, hindsight is 2020. Meaning that when you look back, of course you can see things clearly because you're looking back and you know what you know now from the future. Maybe you look back 20 years ago, you say, I should have invested in Apple. I should have invested in all of these big companies and made a fortune. I should have bought Bitcoin. I woulda, shoulda, coulda. Sometimes we say in English, I woulda, shoulda, coulda. I would have, should have, could have. Right? Using the conditional in English. But yeah, when we're looking back on our life, it's easy to place judgment. It's easy to cherry pick and say, this is what mattered. This is what didn't matter. But when you're in the moment and you're living your life in real time, in the present, that's not always so easy, right? Let's keep listening.
We forget vast amounts of what happens to us in life. And sometimes memory is downright creative.
I like that. Really quick. Downright creative. That's a good expression. If someone is just downright brilliant, downright is kind of a way of saying very, very, very. It's like a really strong very, right? That man is downright brilliant. He's incredibly brilliant, incredibly smart, right? That was downright wrong what you did to that person. If you're criticizing someone, that was downright wrong what you did. Just means extremely wrong, right? Okay? So, memory can be downright creative sometimes. Sometimes we can fabricate our memories. We can make up things that didn't really happen, or we can twist the truth, put a twist on the truth. Maybe it halfway happened, but not exactly the way you remember, right? For example, you went fishing. You caught a fish. In your memory, the fish was 1 foot long. It was a big fish. But maybe you've sort of exaggerated that memory in your mind, right? Maybe it wasn't really 1 foot long. Maybe it was, 8, 9 inches long, not 1 foot long. But you're exaggerating. You're kind of twisting your memories, okay? So memory can be downright creative.
But what if we could watch entire lives as they unfold through time?
What if we could watch entire lives as they unfold through time? What if you could see the big picture of someone's life, right? Not looking back at it from the end, but seeing the whole thing, the whole picture. Interesting.
What if we could study people from the time that they were teenagers all the way into old age to see what really keeps people happy and healthy?
All right, so that's the thesis of this talk. That's the main idea, right? What if we could study someone for their entire life from, starting from when they were very, very young, like a teenager, into their older years, into old age, from teenage years into old age, so that we could get a really clear picture of what made them happy and healthy. Ooh, interesting.
We did that.
We did that.
The Harvard study of adult development may be the longest study of adult life that's ever been done.
Interesting.
For 75
Wow.
years, we've tracked the lives of 724 men.
This study has been going on for 75 years, and they've tracked the lives of over 700 men. Very interesting. That's downright fascinating.
Year after year, asking about their work, their home lives, their health, and of course, asking all along the way without knowing how their life stories were going to turn out. Studies like this are exceedingly rare.
Studies like this are exceedingly rare. Exceedingly. Another way to say very. We're learning a lot of synonyms for very, right? In this TED Talk. Ooh, it's really windy. I'm going to go back this way. Exceedingly rare. Okay? Downright rare. Very, very rare. In other words, this kind of study is very hard to come by. Very hard to find.
Almost all projects of this kind fall apart within a decade.
Almost all projects of this kind fall apart within a decade, within 10 years. So people have tried to do this many times, but it usually falls apart. It usually unravels, comes apart within how long? What period of time? A decade, right? So that's 10 years.
Because too many people drop out of the
People
study.
drop out.
Or funding for the research dries up.
Funding dries up. The money dries up, much like water, right? The money goes away. Makes sense.
Or the researchers get distracted, or they die.
Ooh, they die.
And nobody moves the ball further down the field.
Or the people involved in the study pass away, they die. And I love this expression he used here. No one moves the ball further down the field. There's a ball, there's a field. You've got to take the ball and move it down the field, but there's no one left to do that, right? So the ball is just sitting there.
But through a combination of luck and the persistence of several generations of researchers, this study has survived.
Okay, through the combination of luck and the persistence of several generations of researchers, this study has survived. So it took some luck and it took a lot of persistence. It took a lot of people to say, let's keep going. Let's keep going. Several generations of people, right? That's how this study managed to survive.
About 60 of our original 724 men are still alive, still participating in the study, most of them in their 90s.
Out of the original 700 plus participants in the study, 60 are still alive, right? In their 90s, 90 plus years old.
And we are now beginning to study the more than 2,000 children of these men.
Wow, studying their children.
And I'm the fourth director of the study.
He's the fourth director of the study. Okay. There have been 3 other directors before him.
Since 1938, we've tracked the lives of 2 groups of men. The first group started in the study when they were sophomores at Harvard College. They all finished college during World War II, and then most went off to serve in the war. And the second group that we've followed was a group of boys from Boston's poorest neighborhoods. Boys who were chosen for the study specifically because they were from some of the most troubled and disadvantaged families in the Boston of the 1930s.
Interesting. One group of boys that were picked for this study, right, were these really impoverished, how could we say? These boys who came from a very tough upbringing, a hard upbringing, a way of growing up, of being raised, right? Boston in the 1930s, these boys came from nothing, right? And specifically, because they came from nothing, they were picked to participate in this study.
Most lived in tenements, many without hot and cold running water.
They lived in very poor conditions, right? No hot water.
When they entered the study, all of these teenagers were interviewed, they were given medical exams. We went to their homes and we interviewed their parents. And then these teenagers grew up into adults who entered all walks of life. They became factory workers and lawyers and bricklayers and doctors.
Good, really quick. All walks of life. Really great English expression there. All walks of life. People from all walks of life. All sorts of different ways of life, right? He's talking about their different professions. Some became bricklayers. Some turned into doctors, etc., etc. Different walks of life.
One president of the United
What?
States.
Really? One of those boys became president of the United States? Wow. That's downright shocking. That is exceedingly surprising, really surprising, right? To use some vocab words from this video.
Developed alcoholism. A few developed schizophrenia.
Some had problems.
Some climbed the social ladder from the bottom all the way to the very top. And some made that journey in the opposite direction.
Some climbed the social ladder from bottom to top. They climbed up the ladder of society, the social ladder, right? So maybe they pulled themselves and their families out of poverty. Maybe they started from a place that was really destitute, really difficult. They didn't have anything. They pulled themselves up and out of that place. Whereas others, he said, went in the opposite direction, right? They started from maybe a place of privilege, a really advantaged place, a place where they had everything, life was good, and they moved the opposite way, down the social ladder, due to these different issues. Could be alcoholism, abusing alcohol, right? Drinking too much. Could be schizophrenia, some kind of mental health issue.
The founders of this study would never in their wildest dreams have imagined that I would be standing here today, 75 years later, telling you that the study still continues. Every 2 years, our patient and dedicated research staff calls up our men and asks them if we can send them yet one more set of questions about their lives.
Every 2 years, they send these participants, these people participating in the study, yet another set of questions, right? Every 2 years for their entire life, these guys have been getting interviewed, answering these questions.
Many of the inner city Boston men ask us, why do you keep wanting to study me? My life just isn't that interesting.
Why do you want to study me? My life just isn't that interesting. A lot of them can't understand the fascination with them. The fascination with them. It must seem really confusing, right? It's like, why me? Why my life? I'm nothing special. I'm nothing unique.
The Harvard men never asked that question.
So the Boston men, the Boston inner city men, are like, why me? I'm just a normal guy. The people from Harvard never ask that question. That's funny, right? Maybe they're a little bit full of themselves. Full of themselves. What does that mean? Maybe they have a big ego. They're from Harvard, right? Harvard graduates. They think they are the cream of the crop as far as people go. The cream of the crop. They think they're so important, right? That's funny.
To get the clearest picture of these lives, we don't just send them questionnaires. We interview them in their living rooms. We get their medical records from their doctors. We draw their blood.
Wow.
We scan their brains. We talk to their children. We videotape them talking with their wives about their deepest concerns.
Wow. That last part surprised me. Okay, so he's basically saying that these studies of the participants are really thorough. Super thorough. What is thorough? Very detailed, right? They leave no stone unturned. There's a good English expression. No stone is left unturned. In other words, they look at every last detail, every last part of these people's lives, right? Their mental health, they draw blood, they take blood, looking at their blood work. Wow, the sun just came out. What a beautiful day. Look at this. Really gorgeous day in the park, just right across the street from me here. But sorry, I got distracted. The last part there, they analyze them talking to their wives. It says, we videotape them talking with their wives about their deepest concerns. So, really private stuff there, right? They, on camera, capture conversations of like maybe marriage problems, relationship problems, because that's all a piece of the puzzle, right? That's all part of the big picture. Are you fighting with your wife? Is your marriage in trouble? Why is it in trouble? They need to know these things for the study on happiness, right?
And when about a decade ago we finally asked the wives if they would join us as members of the study, many of the women said, you know, it's about time.
They finally asked the wives, would you guys like to join the study as well? The wives are like, you should have asked me forever ago. It's about time. It's a great English expression. It's about time, meaning I wanted you to do that sooner. It's about time, right? Maybe in the morning, I ask someone to get me a coffee, right? Let's pretend that you have an assistant, and the assistant is supposed to bring you coffee at 8 a.m., right? 8 a.m. comes and goes, 8:30 comes and goes, no coffee. It's 9 a.m., 10 a.m. At 11 a.m., the assistant brings their boss the coffee. Their boss says, it's about time. Or maybe if they're really upset, they say, it's about damn time, right? I wanted that forever ago.
What have
we learned?
What are the lessons that come from the tens of thousands of pages of information that we've generated on these lives?
Good word there, generated. Created, basically. They have tens of thousands of pages of information.
Well, the lessons aren't about wealth or fame or working harder and harder. The clearest message that we get from this 75-year study is this: good relationships keep us happier and healthier.
Ooh, okay. There we have it. The main takeaway. What lesson? What's the main message that we've learned from this incredibly detailed, thorough, in-depth study on happiness? We've learned that it's not about money. It's not about fame, getting famous. It's about good relationships. Period. End of story.
We've learned three big lessons about relationships. The first is that social connections are really good for us, and that loneliness kills.
Loneliness kills.
It turns out that people who are more socially connected to family, to friends, to community, are happier, they're physically healthier, and they live longer than people who are less well connected.
Okay, social connection is not just a mental benefit, it's also a physical benefit. In other words, it's not just good for your brain, it's good for your body as well, right?
And the experience of loneliness turns out to be toxic. People
Poisonous.
who are more isolated than they want to be from others find that they are less happy, their health declines earlier in midlife, their brain functioning declines sooner, and they live shorter lives than people who are not lonely.
Yikes. People who are more isolated than they want to be. Isolated meaning alone, right? They don't want to be alone. They don't want to be lonely. They want more social connection, but they don't have it, right? These people experience greater decline. Decline, meaning these things are going down. If something is declining, it's going down. Mental decline, physical decline. Wow.
And the sad fact is that at any given time, more than 1 in 5 Americans will report that they're lonely.
The sad fact is that at any given time, at any time, 1 in 5 Americans will report that they are lonely. 20% of Americans are lonely. If you ask them, they would admit they are lonely. What about you guys? Do you think your country, where you are watching from, is generally happy? What groups of people do you think are the loneliest? Old people? Young people? Men? Women? What about you? What's the loneliest you've ever felt in your life? Think back. Think about it. What period of your life felt the loneliest, looking back at it? For me, it was definitely my first year of high school, because my family moved from one state to another state in the United States. I remember, quick story time here, I remember I was 14 years old. My family moved from Kansas to Colorado, right? And at first I was really excited about this move because as a teenager, Kansas is not a very exciting place to be. Big, flat fields. There are a lot of farms in Kansas, a lot of farmers. There's not a lot to do, really. At least it felt that way to me when I was 13. And Colorado is the opposite. People go on vacation to Colorado. There's lots of outdoor stuff to do, outdoor activities, skiing, snowboarding, hiking, all sorts of stuff. Climbing, rock climbing, right? So at first I was excited, but then when I got there, I left all my friends behind. It was the first time in my life I realized I had absolutely zero social network, zero social group. Of course, I could text my old friends back home. That's how we would communicate when I was a teenager. We would text, right? Send text messages. But I realized that that wasn't enough. And I also realized how difficult it was to make new friendships. Especially, it was my first year of high school and people have their guard up. People have their guard up a little bit because it's an awkward age, right? Socially, you're very sensitive. You're very self-conscious, and a lot of kids that age aren't that willing to put themselves out there. What does that mean? To put yourself out there. To make yourself vulnerable socially and say, hey, okay, I know this person might not like me. I know they might reject me, but I'm going to try talking to them anyway. Here I go. Including myself, a lot of teenagers aren't really willing to do that, right? So anyway, that was the loneliest period of my life. And eventually, of course, time goes on and I was very, very shy, but I ended up making some good friendships. Friendships I have till this day. Now I'm 31 years old. I still have some of those friendships, but Anyway, little story time there about me. What about you guys? What was the loneliest period of your life? If you want to share, I'd be very curious to read your comments. All right, back to the video.
And we know that you can be lonely in a crowd and you can be lonely in a marriage. So the second big lesson that we learned is that it's not just the number of friends you have, and it's not whether or not you're in a committed relationship, but it's the quality of your close relationships.
That's a good point there. You can be in a committed relationship. You can have a committed relationship, have a girlfriend or a wife, and still be lonely. Just because you're married doesn't necessarily mean that you are fulfilled socially. Fulfilled, meaning you have everything you could want. It doesn't always work that way. Sometimes the loneliest people are the ones surrounded by others, right?
That matters. It turns out that living in the midst of conflict is really bad for our health. High conflict marriages, for example, without much affection, turn out to be very bad for our health, perhaps worse than getting divorced.
Oh, that's interesting. High conflict marriages, existing in a marriage with a lot of problems, a lot of issues, and not a lot of affection, not a lot of love, right? Turns out, staying in that kind of marriage is more unhealthy than just getting divorced. I think a lot of people are afraid of divorce. They think, oh, I could never get divorced. I'm gonna stick it out. I'm gonna stick it out. I'm going to stay in this relationship. I made a commitment. I made a promise. I'm going to honor that commitment, honor that promise, right? But, you know, it could be unhealthy to do that. I think a lot of people, he's right about this, are in denial. In denial. They don't want to believe it's true.
And living in the midst of good, warm relationships is protective. Once we had followed our men all the way into their 80s, we wanted to look back at them at midlife and to see if we could predict who was going to grow into a happy, healthy octogenarian and who wasn't.
Octogenarian, big word, somebody who's 80 years old plus, in their 80s, right?
And when we gathered together everything we knew about them at age 50, it wasn't their middle-aged cholesterol levels that predicted how they were going to grow old. It was how satisfied they were in their relationships. The people who were the most satisfied in their relationships at age 50 were the healthiest at age 80.
Whoa, interesting. Just emphasizing that point, that sometimes relationships matter more to your health and longevity. There's a big word, longevity, living a long life, than like cholesterol, high blood pressure, these kind of physical things, right? Now, of course, there's a limit to that. You can't be extremely unhealthy, extremely overweight. You can't smoke 2 packs of cigarettes a day and just because you have a healthy marriage, expect to live to 100 years old, right? It doesn't work that way. It's not that simple. But the point he's making here is that relationships matter way more to your long-term health than people give them credit for, than people usually think they do, right?
And good, close relationships seem to buffer us from some of the slings and arrows of getting old.
Really quick, great word here, buffer. Good, healthy relationships buffer us from getting old, the slings and arrows of getting old. I actually haven't heard that expression before, the slings and arrows. Basically, the pain of getting old, right? He's saying that healthy relationships form like a shield. They make a shield. They buffer us. They stand between us and the pain. Great word there, buffer.
Our most happily partnered men and women reported in their 80s that on the days when they had more physical pain, their moods stayed just as happy. But the people who were in unhappy relationships, on the days when they reported more physical pain, it was magnified by more emotional pain.
So there's a connection between the happiness of your relationship and how much physical pain you can feel, right? He's saying that these people who were in very fulfilling, happy, loving, caring relationships, when they would feel or experience physical pain, they didn't feel it as much because of those happy relationships, because of their general happiness, right? Whereas, on the other hand, people who did not have those loving, happy, fulfilling, caring, affectionate, showing love, right? These kinds of relationships, when they would experience physical pain, it was, great word here, magnified. Magnified. They felt it at an even bigger scale, kind of like taking a magnifying glass and holding it up to the problem to, here's another big word, exacerbate. Exacerbate the problem, to make it worse, right?
And the third big lesson that we learn
Sit down here.
about relationships and our health is that good relationships don't just protect our bodies, they protect our brains. It turns out that being in a securely attached relationship to another person in your 80s is protective, that the people who are in relationships where they really feel they can count on the other person in times of need, those people's memories stay sharper longer.
If you feel like you can count on someone, if you feel like you can depend on someone, your memory will stay sharper for longer. A sharper memory, a clearer memory, a better memory.
And the people in relationships where they feel they really can't count on the other one, those are the people who experience earlier memory decline.
If you feel like you can't count on somebody, your memory goes away, gets worse, declines faster, more quickly.
And those good relationships, they don't have to be smooth all the time. Some of our octogenarian couples could bicker with each other day in and day out. But as long as they felt that they could really count on the other when the going got tough, those arguments didn't take a toll on their memories.
Some really great English expressions there. First of all, bicker, right? Kind of like arguing in a small way, like little arguments, bickering with each other. I told you to do this, you didn't do that. I told you to wash the dishes, why are they still dirty? That's not like a big, serious, intense argument, right? It's like bickering, nagging, we could also say. I told you to do this, I wanted you to do that, nagging, right? So basically, he's making a good point here that they don't, what is a healthy relationship? It doesn't need to look perfect, right? It doesn't mean you never argue, you never bicker, you never fight. He's saying that in some of these situations, They would bicker for days and days and days, but at the end of the day, in the end, when all was said and done, ultimately, they felt like they could count on each other, right? And so, those arguments didn't take a toll on their memories, have a negative effect on something, to take a toll on something.
So, this message that good, close relationships are good for our health and well-being, this is wisdom that's as old as the hills.
Wisdom that's as old as the hills. Wisdom, like true knowledge, old knowledge, generational knowledge, very important knowledge. We can call that wisdom. I always think about wisdom as being like learned knowledge. Maybe a little kid is really smart, really, here's a big word, precocious, right? Smart, very smart at a young age, precocious, right? A little kid might be precocious, but they don't have wisdom. An old man might not be that smart in a lot of ways. Maybe he can't do a lot of the things a precocious little kid can do, but he might have wisdom in ways the little kid just can't possibly have. Why? Because he has lived experience. He's seen so much in his life, learned so much, grown from actual real life experiences. That has given him wisdom. Wisdom, that's the difference between wisdom and just intelligence or knowledge, right? This is wisdom that's as old as the hills, they said. As old as the hills. I love that expression.
Why is this so hard to get and so easy to ignore? Well, we're human. What we'd really like is a quick fix, something we can get that'll make our lives good and keep them that way.
As humans, we want quick fixes, easy solutions.
Relationships are messy and they're complicated, and the hard work of tending to family and friends, that's not sexy or glamorous. It's also lifelong. It never ends. The people in our 75-year study who were the happiest in retirement were the people who had actively worked to replace workmates with new playmates. Just like the millennials in that recent survey, many of our men, when they were starting out as young adults, really believed that fame and wealth and high achievement were what they needed to go after to have a good life. But over and over these 75 years, our study has shown that the people who fared the best were the people who leaned into relationships.
Leaned into relationships. Leaned in. Really invested themselves, put their time and energy into relationships.
With family, with friends, with community. So what about you? Let's say you're 25, or you're 40, or you're 60. What might leaning into relationships even look like?
What would that look like?
Well, the possibilities are practically endless. It might be something as simple as replacing screen time with people time.
Ooh, that's a big one for me. I don't know about you guys. My screen time has gotten pretty bad the last couple of years. To be honest, YouTube is a big part of it. I just have all of these subconscious habits now. I wake up in the morning, the first thing I do is go check social media, check my YouTube, check Reddit, check Instagram. Thank God I don't have Twitter. I was about to say check Twitter. I don't have Twitter. Otherwise, my screen time would really be through the roof. Through the roof would really be too much, over the top, right? Yeah, that's a bad one for me. He's saying you should replace screen time with people time. Great suggestion. What about you guys? What does your screen time look like? How many hours a day are you on your phones or computers?
Or livening up a stale relationship by doing something new together.
Great word, by the way, stale relationship. If something is stale, it's not really fresh anymore. We can use it to describe food, like baked goods. We can say those cookies are stale. They're like hard now, crusty. They're not fresh and soft anymore. We can use it for relationships too. The relationship is feeling stale. It doesn't feel so fresh and new anymore.
Long walks or date nights. Or reaching out to that family member who you haven't spoken to in years. Because those all too common family feuds take a terrible toll on the people who hold the grudges.
Wow. Those all too common family feuds take a toll on the people who hold the grudges. A feud is like a disagreement, like an argument, right? Family feud, an argument in the family. They can take a toll. They can cause a lot of damage over time. Take a toll on who? Who do they affect most? The people who hold the grudges. If you hold a grudge, then you're not letting something go. You're not willing to forget something bad that someone did to you. I'm not going to forget that. I'm never going to forget how you hurt me, right? That's holding a grudge. So basically, he's saying over time, holding grudges can lead to a lot of unhealthiness, right?
I'd like to close with a quote from Mark
He's
Twain.
going to close now.
More than a century ago, he was looking back on his life, and he wrote this: "There isn't time, so brief is life, for bickerings, apologies, heartburnings, callings to account. There is only time for loving, and but an instant, so to speak, for that."
Wow. There is only time for loving, and but an instant, so to speak, for that. This very famous writer, Mark Twain, basically reminding us how short, how fleeting, there's a good word, gone in an instant. First you have it, now it's gone. How fleeting life can be, right? He's saying, really, there's only time for loving, and there's barely time for that. It's a good closing quote there. Wow, that was an interesting talk. Once again, the title of this was What Makes a Good Life? Lessons from the Longest Study on Happiness by Robert Waldinger. Wow. Great TED Talk. Did you guys enjoy this? This is kind of a nice video format here. You know, the channel has been doing really bad recently, and I know I've talked about it a lot. I even made a video saying I was going to quit YouTube. And here I am, right? I haven't quit yet. But because it's been doing so bad, I've been thinking of ideas for new formats. Not just something that you guys would like, but hopefully something that I would enjoy too. Well, like I mentioned earlier, I really enjoy long walks, taking a stroll. I live in a really beautiful place here in China. And who knows, maybe in the future, I can do more of these videos, just kind of speaking more naturally, listening to some interesting talks, some interesting content, getting that comprehensible input that listening practice that we need for improving our English. And hopefully, we can take learning English to a slightly deeper level. Do you know what I mean? I feel like there's so much surface level content for learning English, talking about, vocabulary and grammar rules and, all of these kind of surface level aspects. But I feel that this sort of thing is what learning language is ultimately all about. It's like, why are we learning languages in the first place? Why are we learning English in the first place? It's to have these kinds of conversations, these kinds of thoughts, these kinds of experiences, right? Thinking more deeply about life. So, anyway, let me know what you think, and you guys have a great one. Catch you next time.